Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. It is now Tuesday, the 18th of July, 2023. On today's update, mainly going to talk about Calvin, that tropical storm headed in the vicinity of Hawaii. There will be impacts. Hopefully nothing too substantial. Water temperatures are a little bit coolish out that way. But we're going to talk about Calvin. We'll take a look at what's going on in the rest of the tropics. Not a lot of ensemble support for something developing in the Atlantic today. There was yesterday and the day before. That's starting to wane away. Still too much mid-level dry air. We're just not there yet. It's not mid to late July that things normally get started. We have about a month to go normally on a climatological basis, and I think once things do go, they're going to stay going. We shall see, right? All right, let's get to it, show you what we've got. We'll start off with the National Hurricane Center. There's Dawn, a tropical storm now, meaning it's all purely warm core. It's more concentrated. What convection there is close to the center. It's not hybrid. This is what it looks like on our tracking chart over on the HurricaneTrack Insider site. If you are one of our patrons, you have access to this from the $10 level and up, just to let you know, and everything is interactive, of course. It was created by our good friend Will Woodgate. A little plug in for Will there. Look at that weird track that Dawn has had, and it is looped around. This is the next several days. Purely tropical now. It'll rack up a few ace points. Accumulated cyclone energy. It's up here in the subtropical Atlantic, the North Atlantic, and water temperatures are marginal. I'll show you what it looks like on satellite here. It's not particularly impressive overall. Some limited convection over here on the eastern semicircle. But other than that, just an interest to shipping out in that area, maritime interest. Meanwhile, yes, we do have this monsoon trough set up off the coast of Africa, a very favorable setup overall. But all of this tells me right through here, all that sort of milky color, the low clouds in there, and there's just not a lot of deep thunderstorm activity. Everything's kind of stretched out. It's all equaling that not much is going to happen in the Atlantic over the next several days, and despite what the GFS was trying to show. So you look at the ensembles, those are a bigger help instead of one operational model. It's like getting a consensus from a group of people versus just one person. You understand? That's how that generally works. All right, let's go back to the National Hurricane Center out here in the East Pacific. Maybe something tries to develop in the Southeast Pacific over the next week or so, but it's not really favorable out there, by the way. It just, we're not having these crazy intense hurricanes. That's kind of interesting, right? Calvin did make it to major hurricane status, but it is weakening. It's moving into that colder water area, but it is also headed toward Hawaii. Let's go back to our tracking map, and you can just scooch it over like this. I love it. Such a cool thing. And there's Hawaii. There's the big island of Hawaii, and the rest of the chain moving off to the west-northwest from there. The center of Calvin forecast to pass south. That means that the northeasterly flow here will be right on the windward-facing parts of these islands. I went out there to Honolulu and vicinity. Let's get my camera back here. Back in 2018 for Hurricane Lane. And it's really remarkable out there on the island of Oahu. Let's zoom in. I can show you what I'm talking about here. Your windward side of these islands, generally up here, where the trades and when tropical systems come in, that gets the brunt of the moisture feed coming around these lows because they are counterclockwise, right? And the dry side, or the leeward side, is remarkable. It looks like New Mexico. Like the rainy side or the windward side literally looks like Jurassic Park, and that's why they filmed it over on that other island. I think they filmed Jurassic Park somewhere over here back in 92, whatever it was, when they did that. But yes, the stark contrast because of the windward facing side versus the leeward side. And that being said, as Calvin goes by, the threat of some very heavy rainfall on the windward side of the big island here, and that's where Hilo is. And some of these valleys and streams and whatnot run right down into some of these cities, so that could be a problem. And then as it goes by, you could get some rain making its way up to some of these leeward sides of these islands, traditionally speaking. So we'll just have to see. So let's just look at it from the Hurricane Center's perspective. They do a great job of the key messages. It is forecast to pass over or very close to Hawaii County tonight. So it's only a few hours away, bringing a period of heavy rain, high surf, and locally strong winds. I'm sure we'll see some of that on social media. It's expected to weaken and move south of the other islands through Wednesday and Wednesday night, bringing the potential for some peripheral impacts. I like the way they said that. And this is very key here. We talk about this a lot. It is important not to focus on the exact track, the forecast track, the center there. And intensity, don't worry about all that. It is a rain event. They spelled it out right there. Rain and wind, maybe some high surf. Those are the impacts to take into consideration. All right, a big rain event possible. They got the radar out there, from National Weather Service. And let me see on our radar scope real quick. We'll just zoom out here, kind of cheat, and scooch over. Zoom into Hilo, see if we're getting into radar range. We'll do this one, and we'll see. Nope, not even much on the radar scope just yet. It's still pretty far away, so I wasn't expecting much. But the bottom line, folks, if you have interests in Hawaii, rain, rain, rain. That could be a big problem, so prepare accordingly for the potential of quickly rising water. Some of these streams, creeks, and rivers that come out of those steep mountainsides there, that could be problematic. And the wind could increase a little bit, make for some interesting scenes, I'm sure. Yes, they have the active volcanoes, and yes, the rain on that could be interesting as well. You get a lot of steam. No, it shouldn't create any kind of calamity where a tropical system and a volcano collide. That's generally science fiction stuff. I'm sure there's a scenario sometime in Earth's history where a powerful typhoon went right over an erupting volcano, and it was probably pretty amazing, but nobody had TikTok when that was happening. Haha. All right, so there you go. That's what we're looking at for Hawaii. And here it is anyway on satellite, infrared satellite imagery. Calvin still has pretty deep convection with it overall. That's thunderstorm activity. And that's what's coming. Not a little dot in a track map thing, right? A line. That's it. That's what's coming for Hawaii. And yes, there will be some interesting impacts. So if you're in Hawaii and you're watching this video, let me know in the comments or hit me up on Twitter at HurricaneTrack. And tell me how it's going tonight. Would love to hear from you, and hope all is well for you at the same time. All right? And just real quick, looking at some of the storm information over on Levi's site, Dr. Calvin. Calvin. I'm thinking Calvin and Cowan, so my brain got mixed up. Dr. Cowan's site, Levi Cowan, different track maps that he's got embedded. They're pretty cool. The modeling for it. Generally speaking, it looks like the center will pass south, and that's not necessarily a good thing, because that means you're going to be on that dirty side of it up here to the north of that center, the windward side, the onshore flow. Hawaii will be having to deal with that. Why won't it be stronger? Not that anybody's wishing for it, but water temperatures are generally too cold for it to be stronger, so the thermodynamics just quite are not there. I can't talk today. Calvin coming in from this direction here, 26 Celsius, that's about 80 degrees Fahrenheit if you round it up. That is the line right there, 80 Fahrenheit, 79.5, whatever, 26 Celsius. I know it's just scientific stuff. Most science is done in metric, so just get used to it. That's what you would need for it to be stronger, generally. But the overall profile of the atmosphere out here isn't very conducive. But there's enough energy and upper ocean heat content, as I showed you on the satellite animation, that Calvin does have some deeper convection. And again, that's going to pass mainly over the big island here. So tonight, it's going to be pretty interesting there. I'm kind of curious as to see what happens. And then it'll move on and finally get into warmer water, and we'll see what happens with it after that. But it'll be well to the south of the rest of the islands once that happens. And to that point, look, there's your negative PMM, or Pacific Meridional Mode, PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, whatever you want to call it. Water temperature is a little bit cooler than normal, and that's one of the reasons Calvin is not stronger. And again, that's a good thing. Believe me, it's really hard to strike Hawaii from the east with a tropical cyclone. The mountains, the orographic lift, what it does, it rips the guts out of the bottom, that lower circulation. Very, very hard to do. Aniki in 1992 came in from the south, I don't know, that's probably something like this, and cut across. That's how you hit Hawaii. You have one coming across, and then it turns back this way. Just saying. Or in the case of Lane in 2018, it came across like that, something like that. But it fell apart because there's usually a big upper trough sitting up here and then part shear and all that kind of stuff. All right, moving along. I think this is pretty interesting. This is the subsurface. I hadn't shown this in a while. Figured I'd pop it up for today. Let's use the color that'll pop better, speaking of popping up. That is your El Nino right there, and this too. There's just not a lot of subsurface warmth waiting, and I've showed this before, in the wings, so to speak. So if we ever get this westerly wind machine to crank up again, west is over here, east is on this side, there's just not a lot of warm water. It's sitting over in the East Pacific. That's why the anomalies map shows the East Pacific so warm. And it's just below the surface there. Now, don't get me wrong, right there off the coast of South America, westward for several hundred miles, the anomalies are pretty substantial. But the El Nino just isn't getting to that strong point right now. Not a lot in the West Pac, what we call the warm pool. I mean, look, one of these is not over here waiting to come east and replace this or join it or whatever. So I just thought I'd show you this. I was glancing at it myself. I thought, hey, I'll mention that today. Kind of, I don't want to say it's stalled, but we're not gaining ground rapidly on the El Nino. And at the same time, someone asked me to show this on YouTube the other day. I forgot to do it yesterday, so here it is. The upper ocean heat content in the Atlantic. Basically, all of this here is pretty close to maxing out the scale. And what that means is, you got your 80-degree line. Water temperatures need to be about 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 26 Celsius, not just at the surface, but the farther down you go, or further down, whatever you say, 200 meters or so, let's say, 200, 600 feet or so, right? Let's call it 200 meters or more, not just at the top 10 feet. It's got to be very deep, that thermocline as they call it. All of these oranges and reds indicates that warm water, that 80-degree line, extends way down. How far down? That's a whole different chart. We can look at that maybe another time if we need to. But just looking at the very basics of this thematic map, as it's called, yeah, all of this is very, very warm. And then even outside of that, these are also appreciable values, even up into the North Atlantic, registering on the tropical cyclone heat potential chart here from NOAA. They helped put this together over at the Atlantic Oceanographic Marine Lab, or whatever it's called down there in Miami, part of the HRD, Hurricane Research Division. So yeah, that with those warm anomalies, the El Nino kind of holding its own, everything's warm. We're all just waiting to see what happens, kind of with bated breath, right? All right, let's wrap this up. A reminder, Patreon has now included anybody can join up. And you don't have to necessarily have a paid membership. You can join for free and at least be on the conversation. When I make posts, they are public. You see those. And then when you want to start joining in a membership where you pledge something, whether it's 4, 10, or more, as you can see our different options here, you can do so. And then you can go and change it back down to $4 a month in the off season. I like this model. It's worked really well. We have seen several new people join up that way. And I think it's like having our own little social media world encapsulated with a nice fence around it to protect us from all of the nonsense on the outside world. So definitely check that out. You can join Patreon without having to dig into your wallet necessarily. Then when it's time and you feel like the time is right to fund something, one of our missions or whatever the case may be, to have access to the premium stuff, the high-end stuff, the stuff that makes us who we are, you can do so. All right, so check that out. My computer desk is wobbly. Not an earthquake here. We're good. All right, so I'm going to upload this for you, and then I got work to do. You guys have a good rest of your Tuesday. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll take a look at what's happening in the rest of the tropics, and I'll also talk more about my trip coming up to the desert Southwest. I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack. We'll talk again tomorrow.